My name is Max, and I'm currently 15. The story I'm about to share happened to me when I was around 11 or 12, although I can't recall the exact age. My friends and I share a passion for exploration, seizing every opportunity to embark on adventures. The key characters in my story are Max, me, Bren, a close friend, Nick, a best friend who always explored with me. This particular incident didn't take place at my house. I was at my best friend Nick's house. We were thrilled about exploring a creek near his place, a location we had visited multiple times, always uncovering something new. This marked the third time something eerie occurred at the creek, following encounters with a man chasing us through a tunnel and a cult that claimed ownership of the creek. If you're interested, I can share those stories later, they're brief. Nick and I had explored the area with a few other friends, but only one, Bren, could join us for this trip. Bren, the oldest in our group at about 14, was like the unofficial leader, even though none of us really listened to him. Attempts to recruit more friends were unsuccessful due to the unsettling experiences at the creek that deterred them. Equipped with snacks and pocket knives, we prepared for the adventure ahead. The walk, approximately a quarter of a mile, posed no challenge to our energetic minds. The path led through a stretch of woods, and after about an hour, we arrived at the entrance of the creek. As a national park, there were no trespassing concerns, not that it would have stopped us. We descended a staircase, our playful antics causing a few laughs. After reaching the creek, we splashed around for about 20 minutes, enjoying every moment. As the sun set, we reluctantly decided to leave, mindful of Nick's mom's curfew. We headed back up the stairs, about 100 steps, and reached the trail leading to the street. Near the end of our journey, I noticed a woman about 200 yards away, holding a knife and wearing a nightgown. Alarmed, I informed my friends, but when we turned back, she had disappeared. The group believed me, and we ran home, with a mysterious white van intermittently following us, its headlights vanishing when we turned around. The unnerving pursuit continued, leading us to take back roads in an attempt to escape the mysterious vehicle. After everyone reached home, we discussed the day's events. Later that night, Bren arrived at our front door, recounting a disturbing experience of something knocking and scratching at his window, attempting to get in. Though no visible markings were found, Bren's genuine fear left us unsettled. Hours later, as Nick and I spoke with Bren about the previous night, they revealed witnessing a girl resembling the one I had described being hit by a white van. The scene vanished before their eyes. Intrigued and unnerved, we continued our search for the girl, seeking answers to our lingering questions.
A few years ago, I was a trainee in a local supermarket. While this may not be the most crucial point, I believe a bit of background information is never amiss. Well, it so happened that I had an early shift and needed to be at work by 6 a.m. It was late November, so it was dark when I hopped on my bike and set off. Up until then, everything was pretty normal. At least, until I took a turn to the right. That was when I heard a scream. The peculiar thing is that it kind of sounded human, but also not. It wasn't a cat in a fight. I've lived my entire life with cats, and I know how they sound when they scream. Yet, it wasn't entirely human either. A shiver went down my spine, I remember it vividly. I pedaled faster, eager to leave that place and reach somewhere safe. The next parts of my journey were relatively calm. And then there was the bridge. To reach the street where the shop I worked in is located, I had to take a route under a sturdy bridge. It's nothing out of the ordinary, and I didn't mind. However, after I passed the bridge, I heard the same scream again, this time directly behind me. It felt like ice was flowing through my veins, and I quickly rode away. Glancing behind me to ensure nothing was following, I saw a strange shadow, vaguely resembling a human, but not entirely. It's hard to describe. I heard the scream 3 more times before I changed my route. Since then, the screams stopped. I never heard them again. But it still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it or when I drive to work. The route is almost the same, except for a few parts. True story, I was around 5 to 6 at this time, and we were moving to a different province. We didn't have a place yet, so we were staying at a nearby shelter while looking for one. I forget where the shelter was, but we were told it had been transformed into a shelter after someone decided to make use of the abandoned building. We were told it was half of an institution or something years and years before I was even born. Anyway, we had a strange room. I'd say it was about an 8 by 9 foot room, with a heavy metal door and 2 bunk beds, one on either side of the room. The bunk beds had metal framing and seemed a tad bit unstable, and the mattresses were hard. The floor was concrete, and there wasn't even a tiny window. But we didn't complain because it was temporary. We were the only ones living in a room on that floor. I remember vividly that my siblings and mother were in the kitchen preparing the food for the shelter. As it was their turn, that was part of the agreement to stay there. Plus, there were at least 40 other people, spanning 2 to 3 floors and a basement. I remember going to bed early because I was really tired. So, my mom opened the heavy door and let me in the room, turned on the light, and waited for me to climb the ladder to the top of the bed before saying, "Good night." She then turned the light off, and I snuggled in the blankets. But I couldn't fall asleep, so I stared at the ceiling. I don't know how much time had passed, but then I heard the bunk bed on the other side of the room creak, as if someone was climbing up the ladder on that bunk bed, right across from mine. Since my older brother was the one who slept there, I spoke, thinking it was him, and he somehow quietly snuck into the room to not wake me up. So when I heard the creaking stop, indicating someone was on the mattress across from me, I said, "Hey, Aiden, you didn't have to sneak in, I can't fall asleep," only to get no response. This was unusual for him since he'd usually say something right away, either to tease me or help me sleep. However, I got no response, just the sound of the sheets rustling a tiny bit. I assumed he didn't hear me, so I spoke louder. "Hi Aiden, did you guys finish the food yet?" No response. To this, I became a little bit worried that something had him upset, so I sat up and turned my head towards the bed, hoping that I would be able to comfort him if he was upset. I barely got his name out of my mouth when I realized it wasn't him but a dark figure, some girl around my age at the time, with 2 braids and a puffy old-fashioned dress. She had been sitting crisscross, staring and pointing in my direction. I, of course, got so scared I couldn't scream, thinking if I did, I'd be harmed in some way. So, I stayed quiet and hid under my blankets. A few hours later, my mom came in and turned on the light with my siblings behind her. I saw the light on, so I automatically assumed someone was in the room, and I was safe. I shot up out from under my blankets and quickly climbed down the ladder and hugged my mom. She asked me what was wrong since I was still shaking. But, thinking that the girl was still in the room, I waited until the next day when we went for our morning walk to explain to her what had happened. After explaining what happened, how I couldn't sleep, and heard someone go on the bunk bed across from me thinking it was my older brother, and then seeing the girl with braids and a puffy dress, that was just a pitch-black figure, my mom was horrified. But just to be sure it wasn't my imagination, she went asking people in the shelter about a supposed ghost, giving no details about what I had told her. This lady, we'll call her Courtney, told my mom,
"Yes, there is a spirit roaming. It takes the form of a girl and has 2 braids and an old-fashioned dress. She used to visit me every night but suddenly stopped when you guys moved in."
We were the only children in the shelter, so that might have been the reason? I don't know. My mom replied to Courtney,
Well, my daughter saw someone with the exact description you had given me. And at first, I thought it was just her imagination, or something like that.
Anyway, Courtney then walked away. Things were pretty quiet after that. I had seen something run in the corner of my eye every once in a while, or heard the sound of knives sharpening when no one was in the kitchen, and the occasional sounds of screaming from the basement when no one was down there. However, it was a family room you could book. One day, our family had booked it, and there were kids' toys, colored maps, wooden tiled floors, and a TV. We were watching Land Before Time, and I looked at the dark side of the room in curiosity. And there she was, standing in the middle of the dark side of the basement. She ran around the corner. The basement was in an L shape, and we were using half of the L side of it. Anyway, at this point, I was more curious about her than afraid. I kind of thought she wanted to play since she was in the toy section of the room. So, I followed her, thinking it was a game of hide and seek. I stood up from the couch without a word, and my mom asked me where I was going, but I didn't answer and just walked into the dark side of the room, which to her was strange since I had a fear of the dark back then, as most kids do. She was confused why I would go into the darkest side of the basement, where light didn't reach willingly. She followed me, and I entered a dark closet. I started looking around frantically and kept asking, "Where are you? Don't you want to play with me? Is that why you keep running around me?" I asked over and over, questions along those lines. My mom obviously was concerned, turned on the lights, picked me up, turned off the TV, and brought me and my siblings upstairs. She asked why I was acting the way I was, and according to her, I said, "She wants to play." After that, my family started getting scratches and tiny bruises mysteriously. Within a week, my mom found a place, and we moved there, leaving our toys and stuff behind, believing the spirit could have possessed them to follow us. We only kept a few clothes, money, food, and IDs. We bought new stuff at the store and lived on the other side of town from the shelter.